Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I am excited to introduce you to our guest. Before I do that, here's a quote just for this episode. The integration of longevity science with financial planning isn't just an innovation, it's a necessity for modern wealth management. Jon Sabes, our guest today, the one and only author of that quote, author of Healthy, Wealthy Longevity, 3+ decades in the financial world, from trading to restructuring debt and building people's wealth to insurance companies and technologies. We're going to talk about the intersection of health and wealth, and of course, longevity, founder of Longevity FP, Jon Sabes. Thanks for coming on the Culture Matters podcast. I got a million questions for a tax attorney turned health pundit.
I guess. Yeah. Great to be here. Thanks.
So, healthy, wealthy longevity. One thing is, are people going to be living as long as people say? Because there's this movement, or there's this uh, I guess, uh, idea running amok on the internet about living to 150 and things. And I consider myself a layperson around this topic, being that, more culture, right, versus living 150 years or something to that effect. What are your thoughts on that? And what is the research that you've dug into say around living longer, and where does that epigenetics conversation fall into it?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, lot in there. Well, let's talk about extreme longevity. I think that's what you're talking about, like living way past age 100. That's
Like
extreme.
eternal jellyfish.
Yeah, right. Yeah, not likely. I don't mean to be a pessimist. I'm a realist. I'm pragmatic in my approach to all things in life. I would say extreme longevity is an outlier. Certainly, people are working towards it. They have throughout history, right? There's innumerable examples throughout history where man is always seeking eternal life, man and woman always seeking eternal life. We're on a very interesting cusp in terms of, I'll call, precision medicine, and really some very fascinating things that are happening and are going to continue to happen at an accelerating pace around our own health. And with that, and with better health comes more longevity, or the potential for it. However, there's a really interesting debate that happens within science, which is, do humans have a theoretical kind of a maximum lifespan? And if so, where is that, and what is driving that? Are we pre-programmed to essentially procreate and then self-destruct, or can we hack that code somehow? And what are the implications? So lots of scientific effort into that with new and innovative tools unlike we've ever had before. And with that, I think what we will see is innovations in our health that do drive some I'll call longevity. But in general, I'm a believer of, look, I mean, the longest known person to have lived is 122 years of age. She was a French lady who smoked. And I
Wow.
kind of, yeah, I kind of like, around 90 years of age, the body, and I go through this in the book, like the body begins to break down in multiple ways. And so it's a what they call a multifactorial sort of very complex, biological machine that's breaking down in many ways. And the saying is, it's not one thing that kills you, it's everything. And that's right. So we fail at many different levels. That brings on an onset of one or more chronic diseases that ultimately leads to mortality. So are we going to see extreme longevity in our lifetime? I'll take the under on that bet.
It's not one thing, it's a multiplicity of things. So is that part of the component, or the intersection with wealth and financial management and the longevity movement, as it relates to your work with epigenetics and things? So for example, my finances just aren't together. I've never been able to get them together. What role could that have on my lifespan?
Yeah. let's talk about that for a minute. First of all, I really don't believe that your finances, your financial situation will really correlate to your longevity. And I think that is a myth, one myth. Now, just hold that thought, because there is some very important research, and I cite it in the book, where the top 5% earners in the United States of America outlive the bottom 5% earners by a decade or more, both men and women. And that is when that was published about, I think that it was Brookings Institute research published 20 years ago. I mean, when they published it, it was jaw-dropping that there was such a disparity in lifespan amongst people based upon their socioeconomic status. However, some of the other research, and I spent a lot of time talking about this in my book, is these communities or populations in what are known as blue zones. And blue zones are 5 geographic locations throughout the world that were found to have populations that lived measurably longer and healthier, and most interestingly, were measurably happier. Now, the really interesting thing, and I talk about this in the book, is these were very financially poor areas in the world. So for me, what that tells us, right, is that inherently money is not tied to longevity, and it's not tied to our happiness. And that should be a relief to a lot of folks. Like, oh, wow. I mean, this whole idea that I have to have money to be happy, I have to have money to live longer, isn't necessarily true. Although why I write the book and why I talk about prosperity in a lot, I mean, it's healthy, wealthy longevity. Wealth is the experiences of life, and money is a very important component to experiencing life and to mitigating the stressors of life. And so while how much you have is you have to have some degree of it. You know, if you're a normal person and participating in normal society. I say, I'm not writing for the outliers, the people who can live on a can of beans in the woods, or the people who, you know, really can experience just incredible health and do incredible things, but not incredible happiness, but their health isn't so much together. I'm just talking about sort of the vast majority of us. And what I propose is that by focusing on our health and focusing on a level of prosperity, those foundational tools are the way in which you increase the odds of experiencing the life you've always dreamed. And that's really why I've written the book, and how I believe financial services figures into that. So I'll pause there. We talked, you know, yeah.
The blue zones. What countries are those?
Yeah. So blue zones, 5 geographic locations: Icaria, Greece. Let's see, Sardinia, Italy.
Wow.
Okinawa, Japan. Nicoya, Costa Rica. And Loma Linda, California, the United States. There was a community in the United States, Loma Linda, California. And this community is dominated by a religious group of Seventh-day Adventists, where their religion is actually around the religion of the body. And so they eat predominantly vegetarian. They're vegetarians, and they value social connections, and they value activities and connections and the body. And so that religion, that religious faith, really sets the stage for some of the habits that are attributed to better longevity, what I'll call better health span and more longevity, as well as more happiness in their lives.
With the Nicoya, where
Nicoya, Costa Rica. It's on the peninsula of Costa Rica. There's a documentary out there. Dan Buettner, he's the one credited with discovering these blue zones with National Geographic. There's a Netflix documentary out there, The Secrets to Living to 100. He visits all these blue zones, and I think what Dan is a genius about is a couple of things, but one is he shows us what healthy aging looks like. You know, I think that should be our goal, is to age in a healthy manner. And that, by virtue of doing that, is going to enhance our health span and our longevity, our lifespan. So if we think about Our lifespan is the length of time we're alive. The health span is the length of time we're healthy while we're alive. What we really want to do is maximize our health span. And I like to say, be like Thelma and Louise and go crashing off of the cliff into our lifespan at the end of our lifespan being healthy. Those years you might spend in chronic disease or lesser health, that's not such a great time in your life. And you become dependent on others and dependent on society to care for you. That's just not a great place to be, although we need to care for those folks. So you really want to maintain that health span for as long as possible, prepare for it so that as you're in that elderly age, you can extend that health span and come crashing right up to the end of your lifespan.
You were with Jeffries early in your career, Ernst Young, these larger companies in the street. How do the values of those institutions line up or misalign with blue zones?
Yeah, I think that's one of the interests. I've been in the financial services industry for, many decades. And I think that was one of the insights and what originally prompted me to write the book. Although the book itself took on a whole different tact, I would say. But what I saw was that being in the financial services industry, what I really felt as though the industry, every financial product and service and decision you'll make is really based upon how long you're going to be alive, and what you're doing at that stage in your life. Are you raising kids in your first job? Are you starting your business? Are you thinking about retiring? Are you retired and you're in your age and so wherever you're at, right? Your financial situation is changing and the role that money plays is really different. And so where I really wanted to go with my career is bringing the idea of these sort of tenets of healthy aging and what does that look like and the role of money so that we can think about money as a tool to enhance our life experience, to bring us measurably more happiness. And if the financial services industry could bring more of those, call it constructs, into the discussion around financial services, I think they'd help a lot more people. And I think they could put them at ease with their financial situation. I mean, the markets are wildly volatile right now as we speak and are talking.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And so how can the financial services industry give people a sense of relief that it's going to be okay, and the things that they should focus on. So if they focus on these foundational things around their health, their purpose, their connections, their social connections, what they eat and what they do in their lives, and the role money is going to play within that role, they can put their mind at ease that they can see a pathway to the life that they want and dream of having without being constantly stressed about money.
Did you notice that the money influenced the behaviors versus the behaviors influencing the money?
Say that one more time.
Like it's as if, see if I follow you. The conversations would be reactive to, okay, I have this life, this life cycle, I'm in this certain place. I'm looking to do these certain things. So the financial conversation reacts to the person thinking, all right, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. This is how I want to show up. But they might not even know what they want. You're looking at more of a holistic to actually go to the roots so that there's an interesting irony in the financial advisory. If it's reacting to someone thinking they want something they don't, that's undermining their actual goals, then it reminds me of, I've had doctors on here that are more holistic, talk about like the health systems, how they just cure diseases versus prevent disease. So it seems like what you're looking to do is more proactive in your approach. I'm not quite grasping it.
No, I think you're onto it. You're absolutely right. Look, there are commonalities within the human experience, right? So those common features within the human experience, if we focus on those and work towards those and understand how money supports that, that sets us up exactly what you're saying is to not get the disease of comparing our lifestyle to the next, the disease of I need to have more, the disease of my portfolio isn't returning what it should. I mean, that's just, it's a disease of focus constantly on money, 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 and comparing your lifestyle to someone else that you see on social media versus looking internally to the core things that really support a wonderful human experience, and this thing called life, and to get the most out of it. And then how does money then support that? I lose you, Jace?
Yeah, the weirdest thing happened. My Bluetooth just connected and it's sitting in the corner of the room. Can you hear me now? Say
I
that,
can.
say that one more time, the last 10 seconds there.
Sure. Um,
Go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, I just got to grab my thought. So what I'm suggesting exactly is what you've described, is that if we focus on those common denominators that enhance the human experience, the human journey that we're all on, which I believe can be found in these blue zone populations, because the research that was done really showed us what are those common features that these diverse populations engage in that really lead them to healthier longevity and having measurably happier, more fulfilled lives. If we focus on those things and the role that the money can play to support those, we eliminate the chronic disease of being disappointed, of being stressed about money, so it's exactly what you're suggesting, which is instead of treating the disease itself, let's talk about the root cause of what is a great human experience, and let's work on that. And then let's talk about money and how we can get money to work for you. So if you come back to that, and I think that's what I'm trying to do more than anything right now in the financial services industry.
How do you
Before
think
this,
our,
yeah,
or go
go
ahead,
ahead.
go ahead. No, no.
What I was just going to say is before I was working on that, I had the opportunity to work in sort of the life insurance industry, and I was really focused on longevity science and the opportunity there. There's an opportunity where that industry could really be financially motivated to help people live longer, right? Because if they help people live longer, there's an actual financial motivation to bring longevity science to the forefront, or even these more holistic ways of living to benefit their own bottom line. So I've
How,
been
how,
working
how,
well
how,
because
how could there be a financial incentive for people to live longer? I'm thinking I'm
yeah.
a cigarette company. I want people to, or I guess maybe live forever and smoke cigarettes. But how
Well,
can financial products,
just think of a life insurance. A life insurance policy only pays out when you die. So if you can get everyone to live forever, you basically could collect premiums forever and never have to pay out a dime. So that's your best case scenario. Again,
in the
I think
sense
that's
that the float could use the float to further invest
yeah, that's
in
how they
more?
work. That's their business model. Collect premiums and then ultimately pay out benefits when people die. That's the life insurance
I would think
model.
that there'd be clamoring, throwing things around, papers, books, just to try to figure out how to get people to live to infinity. I mean, is there a lot of money being invested into that area from that world?
No, and that's what So when I did my last company, in the prospectus that we wrote, the leading line of it was, we're going to make longevity science fundamental to the life insurance industry, because just as you say, it should be. Like, the fact that it isn't is absurd. And so, anyways, that's just sort of one area where I felt as though, and believe, the financial services industry isn't working in and around the longevity science, and what how can they help people live better lives, whether they're financially motivated or not.
How do you think those that live longer that are part of the economy consuming, are valuable to the economy? You know, that concept of like, if you have many, many people that are getting older and they're less productive for the economic system, that's going to create more liabilities than assets. So how do you think do you think longevity, or yeah, if longevity is more, if I understand you correctly, is more of a behaviorism or a philosophy of how to be productive, how do you see that playing into the productivity of a society in the future versus many people living longer but not being nearly as productive? I'll give you an example. Like, we just, I'm now helping my mother. We just got her a car, you know. It's a lot of stress and things that that puts on a family. You know, it's tough. It creates emotional and financial stress to take care of a loved one when they're older. But what if that they were more self-sufficient or capable of doing things on their own or financially sound to be able to do those things on their own? What impact could that have on on the culture, on the I'm curious of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's a huge opportunity. And I think that's exactly what we're speaking about. I don't think anyone really wants, particularly older adults, want to be dependent on anyone.
No, there's a lot
we
of shame, really.
yeah,
A lot of
yeah,
shame.
that's
Yeah.
right. So it's really difficult. So again, I think it's this idea of showing people earlier what habits can they pick up earlier to increase. We talked about this idea of health span, so that how they can increase that health span to stay more productive longer, to stay independent longer. I think every individual that I've ever met really does want those things. And so what are the habits? What are the things that they can do? And I think it's easier than people think it is, although that doesn't make it necessarily easy. so 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 bringing that to the fold, I think we can keep people much more independent, much more productive, much longer in life. I mean, you know what? I think the recent was 60 is the new 40. I think really where we're going is, 80 is the new 60. There's no reason why, if you take care of this body at the age you are, you begin to really care for this body, or myself, I'm 58 and I've been caring for this body now for a
Wow.
while, that when I'm at 80, I expect to perform like I'm 60. I'm 50, I'm almost 60 years old. My body feels like it's 40. And you mentioned this epigenetic age, this
Yeah.
epigenetics, and that's all around gene expression. And my career led me to really start to understand what our health looks like at that molecular level. And that's part of what I've done with the book, which is to describe our health from a molecular, cellular level, so that we
What
can
are
understand.
epigenetics?
Yeah. Epigenetics is the science of gene expression. So we all know about the genome. The genome is our DNA. And above the genome, in the physical area of your DNA, is the epigenome. It's like the epidermis, right? The epidermis of your skin. It's the outer layer of the genome. It's called the epigenome. And it's this incredible layer of biology that basically receives inputs, right, from the rest of your system to um, direct and control gene expression, or how that DNA is expressed. And once you learn how this happens, you start to really begin to connect how lifestyle, how what you think about impacts who you are physically at a molecular level. So we all know what we look like, our hands, our feet, you get a sense for how your blood pressure is going up or down. But below that, right, everything's driven by this thing called, these DNA molecules that build proteins that synthesize and become these systems and become us. And so by understanding gene expression and how every decision you make impacts gene expression to be who you are, you realize how much more agency you have in becoming who you are. I listened to some of your podcasts in prepping for today, which, by the way, was it for who wrote the book Agency? That
Ian
guy,
Rowe. Ian Rowe, wonderful. Yeah. Principal.
amazing conversation. And I
Love
think,
him.
yeah, he's really onto it. I encourage anyone listening to this podcast, listen to that guy, get his book. I'm getting his book Agency, because we
Literally.
have so much agency over who we are. And if we understand who we are, how we become who we are at a molecular level, that empowers us. And it's all about empowerment. If we know we can change who we want to, influence that, and how that, and if we understand actually how it works, well, then we're empowered. And so that's, again, a big reason why I wrote the book that I did.
Do you think that this is more anecdotal, or is retirement ironically disempowering, the concept of it? Because I'm thinking of I saw that Blue Zone documentary, by the way, like last year with my wife and my in-laws. We loved it. It was great. It was really interesting. So that's my question. It doesn't seem like those cultures even have retirement or these concepts, many of the concepts, the constructs that are part of our society. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, retirement is a modern concept. Retirement came from the 1890s out of Germany originally, where in Germany they I'm working on a white paper just to describe this. But it came in the 1890s, and then it was really formally adopted in the 1930s with the New Deal and the Social Security Act in 1935. And at the time they adopted the Social Security Act, and 65 is this idea of retirement. I believe life expectancy at that time was around 69 years old. So this idea was, well, they talked about retirement and the reasons for it. But they didn't expect you to live very much longer after that. And this is why Social Security is so upside down financially, and why we're as a country in such deep doo-doo relative to the Social Security system and in the entitlement system that we now have, because people are living much, 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 much longer than they were in 1935 when we adopted the Social Security Act. But going back to the notion of retirement itself is a modern construct. I think it's one we should really disavow ourselves with. I mean, of course, if you want to play golf and fish or whatever as you get old, it's your right to do. But what we clearly learn from the blue zones is that people who have purpose, they maintain connection, they stay active through movement, and they eat well, live a lot longer without chronic disease. And here's the great part: they're happier. So so
Yeah.
so so I think it's a real, modern notion, and I write about that again in the book. Where, look, and this idea of work-life balance, I think that's a total myth. You
Why?
know,
Why?
I think your life is work. Your life's, and I think this idea of work-life balance came about when people went to these blue lit fluorescent, either factories or floors or whatever, and they were really not great places to be. We're in a whole different realm where work can be symbiotic with life. And so somehow integrating your work in a way where it's just symbiotic and you get energy from it versus it's sapping energy from you, I think should be your number one mission as you think about your career and your professional work.
Mm.
I mean, I sometimes with my partners, we talk about, are we working? I mean, we get so stoked on the things that we're working on that it just doesn't feel like work. So I really think that work-life balance is sort of is a myth that needs to be busted, and retirement is a myth that needs to be busted. And if you can organize your life around your work that sustains you and gives you positive energy and fulfills you and also gives you prosperity and money and keeps you focused and engaged, well, and you should do that as long as possible. And again, I'm not judging what anyone else wants to. If you want to fish and play golf, great, but be careful, because that lifestyle and having 4 cocktails, after the round of golf, I mean, that is going to shorten your lifespan
Yeah,
and your health
because
span.
anecdotally, because you work with so many successful people of all this is my assumption after such a long career in the financial world, you work with many different people in different places of their uh, financial level. My question is around those that were in the more affluent. Have you found them slipping into some of those bad habits in the absence of some responsibility to bear, some load to carry, even if it's anecdotally, like in your experience? Have you
Yeah,
seen people fall into,
yeah,
like you mentioned, the cocktails and the things you know, um, is that something you've noticed that happens in the absence of something to be responsible for?
absolutely, absolutely. One of my favorite sayings: "There's no explaining man's indifference to themselves." You know, in the absence of intention to live healthy and long, creates all sorts of room for bad things to sneak in. So you really have to, it's a practice. It's an active practice. And um and yeah, I see that sneak into people's lives. Yeah, I like to garden. You have to be constantly weeding your life. You have to
Mm.
be weeding your life to, every constantly weeding, they just start showing up everywhere. And suddenly it's just your garden is overtaken with weed. Your life's the same way. You have to be constantly and vigilantly weeding against these weeds that will crawl, whether that's alcohol, whether that's drug, whether that's just negative thinking, just whatever those little things are, they all add up and they will compound in a way that, result. It's the same way the positive ones can compound. And again, you should be compounding in every aspect of your life. You should be compounding in your health. You should be compounding your happiness. You should be compounding in your bank account, right? We all learn about compounding interest. Okay, fine. But compound your career, compound your health, compound your relationships with those that mean the most throughout your entire life journey.
When I was preparing, it was came up that you are bullish on sauna. Have you ever done the cold plunge? You have thoughts on that contracts of the two? Um, that
Yeah.
and where, if at all, do those habits integrate into your thesis here, healthy, wealthy longevity?
Well, sauna, so contrast therapy. So when we talk about sauna and cold plunge, what we're talking about is contrast therapy is one way they describe it, hot, cold. And what you're doing, again, if you think small, think about the molecular bits, right? Certainly when you go in and you to a sauna and you sit in that sauna, you begin to sweat and your heart rate goes up. So you're actually, but think small. You are actually exercising your body at a molecular level. You're causing your molecules to change. You're causing all sorts of biochemical reactions because your body is like, oh my gosh, I'm in this hot box. And so it starts doing things in a way that no other really therapy can get at. And then when you jump in the cold water, same way you get in the cold, same thing happens. Holy shit, I'm in cold. And so your body doesn't necessarily know if you're going to be in there for 30 seconds or 3 hours. And so it does starts again at a molecular level, starts secreting all sorts of hormones and it starts doing all sorts of crazy shit. So what you're doing is you're exercising. I think of it as exercising your body at its smallest bits. And so I've been, and then we can talk about just even the more just general holistic things. I mean, every time I get out of a sauna, I just feel better. My mood is elevated. And why? Well, I believe it's because again, I'm exercising my body at these really fine points that I can't get to otherwise. I've also been a big ultra cardiovascular fitness type guy over my career. And what's amazed me is I've slowed down on that. I don't run like I used to. I don't swim like I used to. I don't do those things. I'm kind of focused on other areas of my health right now. But what's fascinating to me is because I do sauna and it does that, it elevates your heart. I'm always amazed on how I can get out and just go run 5 miles, no problem tomorrow. Like
Wow.
8 miles, no problem. And so I believe sauna really does an excellent job of maintaining that cardiovascular fitness level. And so, yeah, I'm a big believer in sauna therapy. I highly encourage folks for just a variety of reasons to get in a sauna, get outside and find a sauna. Find a sauna that's in your neighborhood, in your community where you can get outside. Maybe there's a pond next to it or a lake that you could, we all grew up in the sauna where at least we all did. Back in the day, the only sauna you could find was in the bottom of a basement of a men's health club, and there were a bunch of old naked men sitting in there. Saunas are actually like, if you think of Finland, they're at the side of a lake. They have a window. So when you're in the sauna, you're actually going outside to cool off and you're coming in and out. It's actually an outdoor experience versus sort of in the basement of a men's gym. I'll take the men's gym one, but if you can find this sauna that gets you this outside experience, it's life-changing.
Where did physical fitness and physical well-being play into your career and the successes that you created in your financial career?
I believe so. Over my call it fitness career. First of all, I wasn't a huge fitness, crazy guy growing. Always outdoors, always health orientated for sure. I just started running when my son was born. I needed to get some activity. I'm like, I got to do something. And so I started running. That led me to running longer. That ultimately I was doing Ironman triathlons and I had
Wow.
ultra distance stuff after that. What I would say about physical exertion, first of all, it's just so good for, I mean, it's so good for you. You can't do enough of it. But beyond that, it's a place to test your self-limiting beliefs. And we need an environment, a controlled environment to test our self-limiting beliefs. How could I run that far? How could I swim that far? How is that possible? And I and I've had all of those. And what you'll find is the road continues. Things get hard, but the road can continue. And you might not be able to run, but you can walk and you can get to that finish line. And you can realize you can do things that you believed you couldn't do. And I think that's an important lesson that we all need to learn at some point in our life. If we want to move forward, if we want to move to the next station in life, whatever that is, whatever you want, but you think, that's not for me, or that's for someone else, or you have some self-limiting belief that's telling you no. What I'm suggesting to you is you need to develop a resiliency and find practice that you can do that. And again, a 5K, if you've never ran a mile in your life, a 5K is a realistic goal. Get a 5K done and you'll go, oh my God, I did this. I never thought I could do it. And that will just lead to great things to happen in your life.
Is there, what are your thoughts on entrepreneurship and longevity? Do they have a relationship, if at all, in the
Well,
future, or the
well, I
spirit of
think
entrepreneurialism?
I think the certainly good health with the spirit of entrepreneurialism, which ultimately leads to longevity. I mean, a couple of things.
Because many of
One,
our listeners are entrepreneurs, executives,
yeah.
running 80 hours.
What I would say is, people would always ask me, well, what are you training for next, Jon? What are you training for? My answer was, I'm training for life. Being an entrepreneur is very, very hard. And I write a lot about sort of the special things that entrepreneurs need to possess in order to be successful as an entrepreneur in my book. Um, and one of them is just simply to have the stamina to do it.
Mm.
Being an entrepreneur requires an immense amount of physical stamina. And so having a physical body that provides you the energy and the stamina to withstand the beatdowns that you're sure to experience is so important. So I've always believed that. And then again, it always teaches you this other point I want to come back to. Even when everything is darkest, when it feels like, how could I possibly continue? How could I possibly succeed? What you can learn is that the road will continue on. And so while it might not feel like it at the moment, if you have the stamina and you can push through those hard moments, you have the chance or the opportunity to find success when it feels darkest and furthest away.
Mm. Yeah, I took a cold shower right before this to make sure I was like getting that midday gut punch.
I can't. I hate the cold shower. I'm a fan of the Scottish shower. So the Scottish shower is so remember the Scott. You can start warm. This is a good one. You start warm, but as you leave the shower, you cool it down.
Oh, I've done that so many times.
I like that one. I can do that. I can't
The
step in a cold
Scottish.
shower.
That's a really good tactic for people because yeah, it's cold. It's cold. Uh so the what about the wealthy component though? How would you say you balance focusing on building that nest egg with not succumbing to that? If because we kind of implicitly are when again talked about this the entitlement of the retirement. So I'm thinking the retirement that concept could lead to like almost like an entitlement. We stop doing what got us there. At the same time, we might want a nest egg or something, so there's security, there's safety. How would you say you would argue balancing the two in the 21st century as people, are living longer, 80's the new 60? What are some of the ways that you'd push our listeners in that direction to be more of the blue zone, right? Bring the blue zone to the if they're listening domestically in the US, for example.
Yeah. So, look, you need a nest egg. As we talked about your mom and our aging parents, and you need a nest egg. You will grow old. You will not be able to work. You will become dependent on others, and having a financial nest egg of some level is just
Yeah, she
absolutely,
doesn't have a nest egg. She has a
yeah,
little chicken. She's the hen.
yeah.
I'm the
Well,
little chicken.
and
But not
and
everybody
so
has the chicken.
as you go through life, you need to be building that nest egg. Um, that's just something we need to do, to so that we're not dependent on our children and others and the government for that matter. So, building that nest egg is just incredibly important. Um, but I think not thinking about maybe old age just in terms of I'm going to retire. I think about healthy aging as staying active, maintaining purpose, connection. I think that's how we have to approach it. And if you're doing those things, you're spending less money. I write a lot about it, which is one of the reasons I like to work,
Oh,
is because
yeah.
I find like I'm either working or I'm spending. They're like,
I
it's
think I
super.
get it now. This is a philosophical conversation because people, if they're not thinking in this way, they're just consuming more in the absence of the productivity to keep up. And you're saying have a paradigm shift of how you're thinking about your retirement, what you're actually doing.
That's right.
It's another way to look at aging. If Because you said healthy aging, active, purpose, connection. It isn't necessarily being a massive consumer like maybe one would be when they're in their youth and they're go, 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 go on the treadmill. You get to the point where
Yeah.
you have all the capital or you have enough. You have to learn how to shut it off and turn it into something else. But that goes against the foundations of our culture, of Western society at some level. So I guess that's why we need people like you.
Yeah, again, I think probably, I don't know about you, but if your mother, but, my father's wearing the sneakers. For the last 15 years, wearing the same sweaters and sneakers. We do start consuming a lot less as we age, and so, but we do need, but that, as you mentioned, the health care. Look, we spend, 80% of our healthcare dollars in the last, years of our lives, and so we have a large financial need, but it's not consumerism as we think about it in our 30s and our 40s and our 50s. Again, that's why thinking about the role of money and what role does money play given the stage of life that we're in. But as you're saying, having a paradigm shift on how we view aging through the lens of healthy aging and maintaining purpose and connection and good health and health span, right? That becomes a way of viewing aging as something to look forward to, maintaining productivity, not being dependent on others, and continue to contribute to society. So I think that's right. It is a paradigm shift. It's a way to see aging. And I think Blue Zones, Dan does a great job with that Netflix documentary. He shows you all these people who are 90, 100 years old, really, adding value and joy to the lives of those around them, rather than being a dependent and sucking energy away from others. They're providing energy and happiness and joy.
Yeah, it's a new narrative. I should say, anyone listening, Barbara, she's still a crossing guard today. Shout out to mom. Episode 242 of the Culture Matters podcast. Um, I'm excited. She's still staying active. But the my curiosity on the journal that you started using for yourself. What are the benefits in your estimation from journaling, and how does that integrate with this healthy, wealthy, longevity story and philosophy to you?
Yeah, I've been journaling for decades now, and I because I couldn't find what I wanted in the market. Originally, I became aware of journaling through Tim Ferriss and the 5 Minute Journal. And when he was talking about prompt journaling, I'd really never heard of that before. So this idea of prompt journaling. And I went to the store. I was going to buy this thing called a 5 Minute Journal. And I travel all the time for my work. And I just like physically didn't like what I saw. So I started making my own. I'd go to Kinko's, I'd copy, I'd spiral bind, and then I would travel with them and I would use them. So and then I started printing them and I started handing them out to friends. And so the prompt journal is this companion product that I've now made available, which is something, again, I've designed. It's a lot of the prompt journaling techniques you can find in other products. What I think is unique about what I've done is I've taken a lot of little concepts and I've kind of created it for something that worked for me. And as I've handed it out to others, what I've gotten really great feedback where people are like, oh, this works for me too. Thank you. And one of the things that needed to be small, it's like your self-coach. I talk about, when you have a coach for whatever reason, that coach pushes you through those self-limiting narratives that you may hold. They remind you to do the things that you wouldn't have done otherwise. And so what that prompt journal is like your little self-coach where you can kind of like get yourself going. And it's really small, so it can put in your back pocket. It's in your vest pocket. It's always with you. It's sort of like your little buddy. And I'm a big believer is if you can't write it down, everything that's going to happen in your life that you really want starts with writing it down. If you cannot write it down for a and if you don't write it down for a multitude of reasons, which we could do a whole podcast on alone, the odds of it happening of whatever it is you want are like infinitesimally low versus if you write it down, the increased odds of it happening. So this little prompt journal is just a daily practice of writing things down to keep your mind focused on what you want to achieve and what you're intending to achieve and not what everyone else wants and not whatever them. So you got to keep that mind focused on what you want. And by writing that down creates an energy within the system or a butterfly effect to start to continue to affect the world around you to get what you want. And that's where I believe, journaling is so important. And what this specific little journal called the Pursuit of Happiness Prompt Journal, why I designed it the way I did and what it does.
How about community? And are there any that you recommend in this world? Like, for example, you opening up across the street from Brian Johnson and you're out, that's the guy that's living to infinity or something. I haven't, yeah,
Yeah.
love to, pick his brain and see what's underneath that. But, like, are there communities you'd recommend or things that you've done throughout your career, been participant in that,
Well, I mean, I don't know Brian, and what I would say, Brian's what I would say a longevity biohack, and I want to be clear that I am not a longevity biohack. What I like to say is, it's the 80-20 rule. It's the 20%. If you get the 20% right, it's going to lead to 80% of the benefits to be had in healthy longevity, and those 20% things are the eating wisely, the movement, the staying connected and having purpose. And those are biohacks, right? But they don't involve a supplement. They don't involve plasma spinning. They don't involve peptide injections. All those things you can do. But frankly, if you don't do the other things right and get those really nailed, all that shit ain't going to make a heap of difference. And so that's kind of how, again, this goes back to this more holistic communities. Look, connect with the Blue Zone folks. Blue Zone has Blue Zone project communities in something like 80 some communities across America where communities are adopting these Blue Zone principles, helping people eat better, making better foods available in cafeterias and in schools, creating walkways and pathways for people to get outside and move easier, to facilitating community events where there's purpose workshops and places to connect with others. I would, if you look up Blue Zone, see if you live in a Blue Zone project community, get involved there. If not, again, your own faith, whatever that is, I'm sure has some. So I would look towards specifically the things that you like to do. If you like to garden, join a gardening club. If you're into faith, join a faith-based club. If you like to read, join a book club. That's the key, is to do what you want to do. I'm prescriptive in doing those things, but I'm prescriptive doing the things that you want to do that motivate you to do them.
Mm, yeah. Have you been to any of these blue zones? I feel like it would be a paradigmatic shift to go. Like I'd
I have
love to see
not.
more of those
Yeah,
places.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm waiting. Dan, if you're out there, I'm waiting for you to invite me. No,
Yeah, we'll
I
invite them
haven't.
on the podcast.
Yeah, I have yet to go to one of the actual blue zones, but I think you mentioned something, and I do write about this, and I believe this. We all can blue zonify your own life.
Mm,
And what Dan and the Blue Zone say, and I believe, first of all, I believe in personal responsibility, intention, self-discipline. You got to have that part. But then you want to shape your environment to make the healthier choice, the better choice, the easier choice. And that's really genius advice.
yeah, yeah.
How can you expect to eat better if your pantry is full of salty, sugary sweets and the freezer's full of quarts of ice cream? I mean, I'm like you. If there's quarts of ice cream or Oreos in the pantry, it's over. Okay. I got to get that shit out of there, and I got to get some good stuff in there. Okay. So shape your environment to help you be successful. And that means cleaning your house, taking care of your self-care, doing the things, the magic is in the hard work that you're avoiding,
Mm,
so do that work and find that magic and find that inspiration. Like, I feel better. Your house is organized and clean. You got rid of all that junk in the garage. I feel better. Magic. So what I would say is, shape your environment in a way that sets you up for success. Don't avoid the obvious, wins that you can do by just putting those tennis shoes or running shoes near the door, packing your backpack, packing your lunch. If you go to work in the office, pack yourself some meal. Take Sunday, go to the store, pack a whole bunch of meals in some plastic containers, and now you're set. You got lunch. And so there's lots of little hacks around, we'll call those your biohacks. Figure out
yep.
those biohacks for yourself.
Personally, I've got a piece behind me. I'm curious, has art a big part of you have this beautiful piece behind you, this art. Is that one of the things that you create your environment with?
So yeah, that piece behind me is my son, Jackson. Hi,
Oh,
Jackson. If
wow.
you listen, yeah, my son paints. And so thank you for noticing that.
Yeah, I love it.
I think beauty is a part so wherever you find beauty, art is certainly beautiful, and what I would say is invite art into your life, whatever. And for me, that's a sunrise and a sunset, looking at a flower. I mean, so one of my prompts is, what amazed you today? There's something to be amazed by every single day, and it's important to notice what that is.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a great piece. I challenge the listeners to pick up Healthy, Wealthy Longevity and the journal. And where can people connect with you on your website? They want to learn more about Longevity FP and really follow your journey and get part of this movement that you're creating.
Thank you. My website is Jon Sabes, Sabes.com. I'm on all the social media platforms, so you can find me on any of the social media platforms, Jon Sabes, and those all have links back to my stuff. And my book's available on Amazon, and I appreciate you hosting me on this podcast where I can, again, have a platform to talk a little bit about this. And I just hope if any of this helps people out there, I'm grateful for the opportunity to pass along some knowledge I've had the benefit of learning and getting it out there for others to consume.
If you're listening to this, share this with a friend that gets it and wants to take their life as seriously as possible. Healthy, Wealthy, Longevity is the book. Follow our friend Jon Sabes. And please leave us a review on the Culture Matters podcast, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much for coming on, Jon.
Thank you. See you soon.